basically, we are going to have several people come up and show what they have done, talk about things, give examples basically of what they've been working on and how it's related to Fargate. So the first thing we're going to cover is going into security. So first we have Aporeto, and I'm going to try to not pronounce your name incorrectly. So
no problem. Hi folks, my name is Arful Huck. I'm Director of Product Management at Aporeto. And what I'm going to talk about is application segmentation for workloads on EKS, ECS. And so yeah, we're getting set up. So as soon as I'm done with that, I'll start with a quick presentation of what we do, and then head right into a demo.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining. I think security is a really important piece and an aspect in this new world and new architecture such as microservices for folks to really pay attention to. Sometimes the models are different. Sometimes we have to think of things a little bit differently in how we architect. So really excited to see what Aporeto brings to the table for our customers and developers to use.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I would have been pretty close at getting your name.
Yeah, no worries. It's cool. It's RF, radio frequency, you know? Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you. So what I want to start with is kind of when we have discussions with customers around applications and how they're migrating these applications to Amazon Web Services and what they're doing with microservices, this is kind of the journey. You have an application that typically sits within your data center within the confines of a perimeter secured by a north-south firewall. And in these types of scenarios, the IP parameter really is what your north-south firewall is protecting. It is a big threat surface. People, to solve these problems, you do things like segmentation. Now, when you try to move to cloud, what we typically see customers try to do is they try to build VPN tunnels, kind of build an overlay to extend the data center into their cloud. So they think of cloud as an extension of the data center. And this only exacerbates the problem because essentially what you're doing is you're really just making your IP parameter much larger. And with microservices, you no longer have monolithic applications, but what you have is an application that's highly distributed. So a single tier application, a single component application may become n number of components. You've got containers, multiple containers on a host. And so the threat surface is actually pretty big. And we introduced kind of new types of attacks, API-driven lateral attacks. So really what we're trying to do at Aporeto is application segmentation at the network and API layer so you can prevent these lateral attacks. How do we do this? Our kind of theory here is, and the way we've built the solution is, you need to reduce the threat surface. And how do we do this? We isolate every workload. So every workload needs to be isolated. And the way our technology operates is we give every single workload a cryptographically signed identity. And we'll talk about this, what we mean by cryptographically signed identity. And identity is critical because what we're going to talk about next is authentication and authorization. All communications at the network and API are authenticated and authorized using a centrally defined policy and enforced in a distributed manner. So now what you have is the ability to segment every single application component, no matter where that application component is, whether it's sitting on-prem, whether it's sitting in AWS, in your EKS cluster or in an ECS cluster, doesn't really matter to us. And the policies are portable and they operate independent of the infrastructure in which you actually deploy this application. So that's kind of the fundamental of what we do at Aporeto. I'm going to dive right into the demo here, but the last slide, the way we work is the solution in itself encompasses, if you have an Istio environment with service mesh technology, or using a Kubernetes environment, or you have an ECS cluster, doesn't really matter to us. Even we actually are able to work with Lambda functions as well. So with that, I will actually go into the demonstration. And for the demonstration, what I have set up is So this is what this is the Aporeto console. It's a SaaS-based service that we offer. And what I have set up for this demonstration is actually an EKS cluster. And this EKS cluster has an application called Apple Wine. What it does is it serves beer and wine. And so one part of the application sits in an EKS cluster, and the other part of the application, which I'm simulating using these client app and admin app, is actually sitting in an ECS cluster. So what I'm demonstrating to you here is a heterogeneous environment, an application that is deployed across an EKS cluster as well as an ECS cluster. And what I'm going to show you is how we can do authentication authorization for network segmentation as well as API level segmentation to protect lateral movements, right? We talked about identity. So what is critical to us is we create this cryptographically signed identity automatically. And what we do is we make use of information available to us. So for instance, here I'm demonstrating to you the fact that we're able to use the AWS identity document that's available to us on the EC2 instance to extract information around where is this application running. And we're able to also introspect the Docker API and the Kubernetes API to figure out what type of application is it running, what are the labels, selectors associated to this application. All of this creates what we call a workload identity and a cryptographically signed identity. So I'm going to start this demonstration real quick here. What I'm going to first do is run a curl request. And you see that this first request is denied because what I am doing right now is from my EC2 instance directly, I'm trying to actually access this application. And there's a policy in place that says I have to present an identity in order to get access to this application. And what I have done is just created, I have a policy, a default denial policy that says, if you don't present the right identity, I'm not going to give you access to this application. So that's just to baseline to show you that at a network layer, I've just protected this application across multiple clusters. It's actually going through a load balancer. The EKS cluster is protected through a load balancer as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a request. And what I'm making a request here is for a random beer. And you see that request went through. And the reason why it went through, and this will show up here in just a couple of seconds here. So you see this client app just made this request. It went through. The reason it went through is because I have a policy in place. And this policy essentially says if my application presents to me an identity app equals client app or app equals admin app, it should have access to this specific server application. And what I have just demonstrated to you here is the fact that we did this segmentation across multiple clusters, across a load balancer. So really what we're helping our customers do is solve a problem of hybrid cloud segmentation across multiple clusters and multiple environments, right? Now that's at a network layer. Let's talk about it at an API layer. So now if I actually try to do a post request, it's actually going to get denied. And the reason is because this specific application only has the ability to do a GET on a specific API endpoint. So when I tried to do a post, it was denied. And we have the ability to give you a visibility into what requests gets accepted, what requests gets denied as well. We have the ability here, for instance, I'm showing you for this specific microservice, the post to beer was denied because the correct identity was not presented. Now what I'm going to show you is, okay, so that request was denied. Let's actually give you the right identity, and that request will go through. So this time it will come from an admin app, and the admin app has access to do a post on a specific API endpoint, and you will see that request come in through here very quickly. There again, so you have the admin app making that request, and you'll see that it was a post to beer, and it was allowed because it presented the right identity, right? So with this kind of an identity-driven model, one of the biggest things our customers value is the fact that if I have a change in my environment, so say for instance, I'm going to scale one of my workloads, right? And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale a specific workload here. And when this workload scales, I will have to not define any new policies, because essentially what I've done is I've created policies based on identity. And as long as I present the right identity, I have the right level of control. I have the right level of access control for these applications. So what you'll see happen here is I just launched a bunch of new containers. I didn't have to go in and change any new policies. I didn't have to go touch my security groups. I didn't have to go touch my north-south firewall to allow these policies. And all of a sudden, I have the ability to access my workloads, right? So the idea here is we're solving a problem for dynamic workloads. Your workloads can be anywhere. It can be on any sort of infrastructure. In this case, we're showing you an EKS and an ECS cluster. It can be on-prem or in a cloud environment. And that's what I had for my demo.
Awesome.
That's
Thank you
really
very
cool.
much. Very informative demo.
Thank you.
So Tiffany, what were your thoughts? What do you think?
I actually hadn't seen some of the tooling that had been used there before. I like how it just is set up and then being able to like play around with it and look into security in that kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way we have defined this tool is it really allows customers to kind of get a view into what's happening at a network layer as well as an API layer, how to define those policies, and we consume, existing policies from Kubernetes as well. So really, Kubernetes policies only work within the construct of a single cluster. We're able to kind of solve this problem across multiple clusters, across multiple environments.
Perfect, Tiffany. So let's talk about this a little bit between you and I. So it seems like there's a lot of great visibility that Aporeto provides to our customers, especially if they're using AWS Fargate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like the idea of basically anything that makes it so customers have all the different types of options to be able to interact with security, to be able to look at that at it really easy, way to view it, because say some people like using just CLIs to do everything, some people like being able to see how that all connects together visually, and I think that is a really good idea in the way it's set up and everything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, for anyone who's ever known me, I'm a visual learner and much less so a red learner, so having things that are visual, especially in a world of moving to microservices where apps may be made up of tens or even hundreds of microservices, having that visibility where you can see how things are communicating and setting granular policy, I think really will make a difference for our customers. So I encourage everyone to take a look into Aporeto and take a test drive on how it works alongside of ECS and Fargate and some other of our services.
Yeah, and I specifically like the fact that it's actually interactive, because a lot of the time when you have things, you have CLI, which is you type text, you have visual, which you can click buttons, but sometimes like having things actually like move around and such is a neat feature.
Awesome.